Welcome to the AFCON Chronicles. We're here in Rabat. Of course, it's the end of the group stages. My name is Usher Komugisha. I'll be your host for this one. And I'm joined by the evergreen Maher Mehazi from Algeria. And Africa as a country. Can you tell us what is that about?
Africa as a country is a website where we sort of look at the African continent via different lenses, whether they be political, social, or economic. So if anybody hasn't heard of the website, I highly recommend they check it out, africasacountry.com.
Okay. The group stages are done. What have you taken out of the group stages?
It's passed by so quickly. I think this is an AFCON that was very highly anticipated, Usher. Everybody was saying, this is going to be the best AFCON ever, this is going to be the best AFCON ever. I think in many ways it has been, particularly from things like a logistics standpoint. You know, the fact that every team has its own team hotel. The stadiums have been incredible. I don't think there's one stadium on the African continent like the Prince Moulay Abdallah Stadium with the wraparound television screen. The pitches, I remember that very first match, Tunisia versus Uganda, it was pouring, and throughout the entire group stages it's been pouring as well, but the pitches have remained pristine. They were never waterlogged. So I really think that in many ways this has been a great African Cup of Nations, but it's also been different. It's taking place in winter, it's raining. North Africa isn't an integrated region of Africa like West Africa is with Cote d'Ivoire, like maybe East Africa will be with Pamoja, where we have different communities coming together. So I think maybe the South African coach, Hugo Broos, was a little bit right when he said it's maybe lacking a little bit of AFCON vibes, but overall, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and what's your headline for the group stages?
It has to be the favorites stepped up and have played up to standard, because particularly at the last African Cup of Nations, there were so many, with all due respect, small teams or quote-unquote small teams that were upsetting favorites. It can be, you know, Equatorial Guinea beating Ivory Coast 4-0 at home. It could also be Algeria losing to Mauritania, who won their very first ever match at any African Cup of Nations before. This time, the big boys have taken care of business, whether it be Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Algeria, Morocco, Nigeria. Everybody that's been dubbed favorites have stepped up to the occasion and played very, very well. So I think that's been my main takeaway from the group stages.
It's interesting you talk about Equatorial Guinea, because I remember Cote d'Ivoire needed to wait for Morocco to beat Zambia 1-0 for them to breathe again. The fans on the streets in Abidjan, across the country, you know, they actually clapped for Equatorial Guinea and said, you know, we respect you and everything that you're doing as a team. And then from then on, you know, everything changed for them. But here you feel that the big boys are, you know, comfortable, they are taking care of business, and just the way that they've approached the tournament all around. But what team do you feel is tournament ready?
A quick point on that before I answer that question. Riyad Mahrez, the Algerian captain, said he believes that what has made the big boys play up to standard is the fact that the pitches, you know, resemble European pitches, that everything is perfectly manicured. We're not talking about Japoma Stadium in Douala in 2021. And then the weather as well. You know, some of that stifling humidity, for example, in San Pedro, in Cote d'Ivoire, was what the Moroccans were complaining about when they had to play against DRC. He believes that the pitch conditions and the weather conditions acted as equalizers, so to speak. So maybe that's one of the reasons why the big boys have stepped up to the occasion. Sorry, just quickly remind me of your question.
Yes, I was asking you what teams are tournament ready.
I think Morocco have been from the very beginning. They've grown into this tournament for several reasons. I think Walid Regragui had to make some tactical adjustments. For example, using a real winger instead of Ismail Saibari from PSV Eindhoven on the wing. And then Ashraf Hakimi coming back is also adding to that momentum. It feels like now they are tournament ready. Algeria came into this tournament with a lot of questions being asked about them, because during the World Cup qualifiers, which is, you know, the most recent barometer that we have to judge these teams, they were one of the highest scoring teams on the African continent alongside Morocco, but they also conceded the most amount of goals for the teams going to the World Cup alongside Cape Verde. So we didn't know what to expect. And then they put in a performance like that against Burkina Faso, where they win 1-0 and they defend well tactically, you know? And you think, okay, they're the only team that hasn't conceded a goal in the group stages so far. So I think the North Africans, we can label them tournament ready, with the exception of perhaps Tunisia, which have perhaps disappointed a little bit.
It's interesting you talk about Morocco from that perspective. The fans booed them after the draw, you know, with Mali. What was that about? Did you get a feeling of why they were complaining?
Well, the expectations are sky high. every single taxi I take, I'm sure it's always such a good measure of the society that is the taxi driver, because they speak to so many different people. So every single taxi driver I speak to, even our Moroccan colleagues, Usher, I've been asking them the question: how far do Morocco have to go for Walid Regragi's job next summer to be safe at the World Cup? Everybody has said he needs to make it to the final or win the competition. Which is, think about how absurdly high that is for a coach that took you to the semi-final of a World Cup just a few years back. And it's high because a few different reasons. Everybody acknowledges that the infrastructure is there for a coach to do a great job. They recognize that the talent pool is there as well. And then also, there are a few really good coaches waiting in the wings, whether it's Tarek Sektiwi, who won the FIFA Arab Cup, who won the CHAN, the African Nations Championship, and who won a bronze medal at the 2024 Olympic Games. Whether it's Mohamed Wahbi, who won with the under-20s, the FIFA World Cup. There's a crop of talented young Moroccan coaches waiting. And so people, if they feel like Walid Regragui has been a little bit too stubborn, if they feel like he has a little bit too much ego, if they feel like many people have told me he only has a plan A, he doesn't have a plan A, B, or C, I think that's the reason why we saw the Moroccan fans be a little bit impatient and boo the team.
Well, you have to understand where the Moroccan fans are coming from, winning the Under-20 World Cup in Chile, winning the Arab Cup, and of course winning the CHAN that was played, in East Africa. Looking at the team that he has, yes, Ashraf Hakimi is here, but it looks like a very balanced team. And you have to remember that semi-final, achievement that they had was in Qatar. Yes. Playing in Qatar felt like they were playing in Morocco, if you remember their experience in Doha. But let's talk about, the other teams on the continent: Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, the DRC, Cameroon. Do you feel like they're coming back into the action? Are they part of that conversation?
Senegal, I'm not revealing anything to anybody. We all know that they're probably the best team in Africa, alongside Morocco. If not, I think that their talent is even more than Morocco's. It's just that Morocco's playing at home this time around. And they've performed up to standard again. If you look at who have Senegal lost to over the last few years, okay, at the last AFCON, they lost to the eventual champions, Côte d'Ivoire. And then they won the AFCON before that. And the AFCON before that, they lost to the eventual champions, Algeria, in 2019. And the AFCON before that, they lost to the eventual champions, 2017, in Cameroon. So they've only been losing to the champions, And what's impressed me the most this time around, and in general about Senegal, is they've managed to transition between generations. Because we have the old guard, the old lions, so to speak, of Sadio Mane, of Idrissa Gana Gueye, of Kalidou Koulibaly, Edouard Mendy, the spine of that team. But what they've been able to do that so many other national teams haven't been able to do is blood in a lot of that young talent, whether it's the midfield kids like Lamine Camara or Pape Matar Sarr, whether it's the new PSG star boy, Ibrahim Mbaye, who's been playing incredibly well in this tournament. They managed to marry these two generations and create a cohesive group. And I think that's been one of the main strengths of the Senegalese national team. That's why they look so good.
Yeah, we know that they create a lot of talent back home. Jambas and Generation Foot, the two biggest academies, in the country. And of course, in 2023, you remember they won the under-17, they won the under-20s, won the beach soccer. So there's always a good vibe around the country.
Usher, it's funny because there's almost an inverting of phenomena here between Morocco and Senegal. Senegal didn't win any trophy at any level until they won the 2021 African Cup of Nations in Cameroon. And then, as you mentioned, under-20s win the AFCON, under-17s win the AFCON, they win the CHAN, they win the, I think, even beach soccer or something like that.
Yes, in Mozambique, yeah.
Morocco, it's the opposite. It feels like the under-20s won the FIFA World Cup. The women are doing an incredible job at the AFCON, getting to the finals. The under-17s are playing well. The under-23s won the AFCON. Everybody's just waiting for the senior men's national team. For Senegal, the senior men's national team liberated the rest of the footballing landscape. Here it's the opposite. Everybody's saying, okay, we're winning everything else. We need the senior men to step up to the plate.
And it's interesting you say that, because I remember watching the video that Ashraf Hakimi recorded for the under-20s ahead of the final. And you could see in his eyes that he was, saying, I hope we can do the same and make our people proud. We've spoken so much, to Naif, and he said, look, it feels great to play at home and to play, next to family, but also we want to give the fans everything. So it's interesting in that perspective. But Cameroon, the DRC, how do you feel about these two teams?
So I think two different teams in that Cameroon, we didn't know what to expect. They're coming into this tournament with a new coach. Anytime you come in with a new coach, we don't know what to expect. Now, I spoke to colleagues in Cameroon that told me about this new coach, David Pagou, that went during his time with, for example, Bamenda, who he helped qualify to the African Champions League. That's no mean feat. he likes to play with, three at the back. He likes to play with wing backs, and he likes to play very vertically. And effectively, that's exactly what we've seen. That Cameroon have a clear identity of how they want to play their football. And also, he's gotten rid of a lot of the older names, the players that have established themselves and that have ego. So we can talk about Andre Onana, we can talk about Andre Frank Zambongisa, who was more out due to injury, Vincent Aboubakar. These are legendary players. Many of them have won African Cup of Nations titles for Cameroon. But I think when you need to turn a fresh page, you need players to execute your exact instructions. It's always better to do it with the young generation of players. And in the average age of that Cameroonian national team in the last match against Cote d'Ivoire, the in-laws, that was 24.7 years of age. That was a very, very young team that David Pagou lined up. And so I think it's been great to see that they've decided we're going to go into this tournament with a bunch of young players. We're going to run as much as we can. We're going to play very vertically, and we'll see. And they look very good. Honestly, they look incredible. So that's been a pleasant surprise for me. And DRC, you talk about consistency. Which side, besides maybe Senegal, or maybe Cote d'Ivoire, have been more consistent on the African continent? They finished third last time around at the African Cup of Nations. They've been very, very good throughout the World Cup qualifiers. Hopefully, we all hope, Africa hopes, that they will qualify for the World Cup next March. And now, think about the teams, think about how battle-tested they are, the teams that they've played over the last 6 months. They just played Senegal in the group stages. Prior to that, they defeated Nigeria and Cameroon. They had to play Senegal in the World Cup qualifiers as well. They've played, teams like Cote d'Ivoire. They're very battle tested, and so I have really high hopes for them as well.
And what teams have impressed you without dominating games here in the AFCON?
Without dominating games, I might talk about maybe like some of the quote-unquote smaller teams, but a team like Benin, for example, I thought played DRC very, very closely, and I didn't think they looked ridiculous against Senegal despite losing 3-0. A team like maybe Mozambique, who we saw at the Cote d'Ivoire, they drew with Ghana, for example. We saw that they had a lot of spirit. They have a lot of experienced players. Dominguez, of course, 42 years old. But also, a player like Jenny Katamo, who the entire continent respects him. We all know he's a very talented player. But we always sort of wait for him to put in his best performances at the African Cup of Nations. And he's managed to do that this time around. So at the time of recording this, we still haven't seen them play their third group match, but we know that they've already qualified to the round of 16. But I think teams like that, they haven't dominated, but they haven't been ridiculous as well, and they've assured their place in the final 16.
Well, I think for me, it will have to be Mali. Going into the tournament, you feel that, especially the way that they played against Morocco, playing against the home team, and that Moroccan team that and the fans, they're always saying see, go. Exactly, and the way they managed the game, very calm, and of course they have fancy jerseys, which I like very much, very beautiful. But at the AFCON, Maher, do you feel that it's about dominance, or do you have to manage moments in a game?
I almost feel like the group stages should be about dominance, because that's what establishes your identity and gives you an incredible amount of confidence. But once we get to the knockout stages, the last AFCON showed us that these are two entirely different tournaments. You might as well have said, group stages are done, let's put it behind us, send it away. And now it's the knockout stages, and the knockout stage I really think is about navigating difficult moments. And so for that, usually you have to rely on coaches that can make in-game adjustments and experienced players that can also help you execute those in-game adjustments. So I think it's a question of sort of two halves, so to speak. The first half is the group stages, and the second half now is the knockout stages. And here I think it's more about knowing how to navigate those moments.
It's interesting you talk about that, because I remember Ghana at the last two AFCON editions, and I'm talking in Cote d'Ivoire and in Cameroon, especially when they played against Mozambique. If the goalkeeper had not touched that ball, they would never have drawn that game, and they would not be out of the tournament, if you remember.
It's not out of the tournament, actually. Even if Morocco beats Zambia, Cote d'Ivoire don't make it to their knockout stages, and we have a different AFCON champion. But you're absolutely right. They were up 2-0 with 5 minutes to go. And these moments, we call them brain farts at times, that's what can end up costing you a tournament, for sure.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about players. Who would you say has been the best player of the group stages?
It's a toss-up. I really like the two Moroccan players, Brahim Diaz, who has been the most consistent. He scored a goal in every single match. but then Ayoub El Kabi too. Have you seen those scissor kicks, Usher? It's ridiculous. How does he do it?
You know, there's a video I saw on Instagram where someone goes to the bedroom and they're kicking, and in the kitchen as well. I don't know if he's, practicing these at home or in the camp where they are. But if you know the story of Ayoub El Kabi, he absolutely deserves all the limelight that he's getting. And I.
Working as a carpenter.
Exactly, and I know that when that goal went in, one of our colleagues who is actually producing this show, Wandile, said again. So I turned to the screen and I was thinking, what just happened? Again, another, Yeah, but tell us about the carpenter story.
Yeah, he's a player that didn't really sign a professional contract until he was 22, 23 years old. And when he was a youngster, 18, 19, that age where so many footballers, they don't know if they're going to make it or not. He didn't know if he was going to make it. He decides to work as a carpenter full time. Doesn't really work out. And he ends up signing a professional contract at 22, 23 years old. And then it didn't really explode until the African Nations Championship that Morocco hosted in 2018 and 2020. Those were the tournaments where he really exploded onto the scene and then signs for Wydad Casablanca. And now he's 32 years old. It's a player that I think if he was detected earlier, probably would have had a better European career.
But what player do you feel has increased his value?
There's a few of them, and usually when you talk about increasing value, we're talking about youngsters. The Algerian Leverkusen attacking midfielder Ibrahim Maza. He finished the last match against Burkina Faso as man of the match, and he was also scored a goal in the first match against Sudan. He's such a good example of what a modern midfielder should be, particularly an attacking midfielder. He has a feel for where to place himself to find little pockets of space, and when he receives the ball, he always knows where the defenders are, where his teammates are, and he turns on, like the British say on a sixpence or on a half pence, I don't know what they say, but he turns very quickly and then progresses the ball vertically, whether it's dribbling or passing. So Maza, I think, went from a 10 to 15 million euro player, and I think he's probably all the way up to like 25, 30 already. And then there's been a good few talented players from the Cameroonian national team. We talked about how they've been using a lot of young players, but a defender like Koto, who I think is playing his football in Switzerland, he's only 22 years old. He's been incredible. So maybe those two players are the players that I've been keeping in mind.
All right. And when you think about in general, is there any player, for instance, down south in East Africa, Tanzania, who's impressed you?
Tanzania, actually, Haji Mnonga, who's playing at Salford City, I thought had a very good game against Tunisia. Right back that, playing in the 4th division of English football, but manages to, that doesn't mean anything at the African Cup of Nations. I remember when Benin knocked out Morocco in the 2019 AFCON, Ceci Dalmeida was playing in the 4th division of English football, and he was running things against players like Mbark Boussoufa or Karim El Amadi, who are playing, in top clubs in Western European leagues. So in the AFCON, it doesn't mean much, but I like a player like Haji Mnoga from Tanzania. Uganda, I really, really love Travis Mutiaba. I think he's a young player that, with his left foot, has been, according to Tunisians, one of the best young players in the Tunisian league so far this year. So I think he has a huge, bright future. Those are two players that I like.
And what player do you feel influenced games without scoring?
Yeah, again, we're probably talking about defenders here, but Chancel Mbemba has been great for DRC. He's a leader, and without him, the DRC would look completely different, But besides him, a player like Hicham Boudaoui from Algeria, he's been a box-to-box midfielder, contributing with tackles, interceptions, but also running into space behind the defensive line. He's been another very, very good player. Maybe last one I would mention is Mamadou Sangare from Mali, a player that has played, I think, 16 times already. I think he's for Lens in Ligue 1. He's, I think, only 20 years old. He was man of the match in the final match against Comoros, and already being linked with names like Manchester United. So Mamadou Sangare brings a little bit of a different touch to the Malian midfield, which has always been very physical and very demanding. But with Sangare, he adds a little bit of artistry as well.
And Bokazi from South Africa?
Mehazi, for me, is the best young defender. Yeah, let's say it, the best young defender on the African continent. What he's impressed me with most in this tournament is his distribution. He's been playing some long passes to a winger on his side, Moremi, at times, or Apollos, and 30, 40-yard passes in the air. I didn't know he had in him. We know he's physical. We know he's strong. We know he's a leader, captaining a side like Orlando Pirates at such a young age. But I didn't expect the distribution bit of it as well. It's just that one match, though, against Zimbabwe, he got turned inside out by Maswanise for that peach of a goal. But that can happen to any defender. Any defender that's aggressive is going to get crossed up every once in a while.
Well, I guess he'll be comforted by the fact that, the way he approached the game against Mohamed Salah, that's a game where you have to perform and everyone across the world is watching. And I think he did a fantastic job.
For me, there is no ceiling for the kid. I know some people were maybe a little bit disappointed that the move went to an MLS club. From what I understand, the MLS club also has connections in Europe, so perhaps he could be, loaned to European clubs, maybe in the off season. But he's still so young. There's so much time for him. And for me, it doesn't really matter where you sign. If you perform and you perform at a high standard, eventually you're going to get to where you need to go. So if he continues to just remain focused, work on his football, improve in ways like we've just spoken about with his distribution, again, there's no ceiling for Mbekazeli and Bukazi.
Yeah, you'll get it right. Well, talking about big boys, let's talk about a big nation that is worrying you at the tournament.
Look, worrying in the sense that I think they're going to underperform, or worrying in the sense that...
The way that they're playing, the way they're approaching games in general, in the 3 games that they've played.
Do we count Tunisia as a big nation or no?
It is. They're going to the World Cup.
Yeah, so a team that we call the Germans of Africa because they've qualified for every single AFCON since 1994. And they made easy work of their World Cup qualifiers. Now, it helped them that Equatorial Guinea were docked 6 points because of the Emilio Nsue affair. FIFA had deemed him, ineligible to play over the last 10 years. And so they docked Equatorial Guinea 6 points. But still, they ran through that group. It wasn't the toughest group, but they ran through it very confidently and easily. And they've been recruiting so many players from the diaspora. So Ismail Gharbi, who was man of the match most recently yesterday against, I'm blanking the name. Who did they play yesterday? Tanzania. So Ismail Gharbi, 21 years old, he was a big prospect at Paris Saint-Germain. They brought in players like Sebastian Tunekti, who plays for Celtic, and he was very good against Nigeria in the final 10-15 minutes of the match when Tunisia were pushing for an equalizer. They've also brought in, players like Hannibal Mejbri over the last few years, who now already has 40 caps as a youngster. So I had high hopes for them. I thought, with the way they've been recruiting the diaspora, bringing in this attacking influx of talent, this could be the year where we don't think Tunisia is too much of a pragmatic team, too much of a team that engages in the dark arts. But after an incredible start to the tournament, which was a 3-0 dispatching of Uganda, they've been disappointing. So I all of a sudden feel very, very pessimistic about their chances.
Wow. Are they the only ones that are worrying you?
Yeah, all the rest of the big boys, I think, have looked pretty good. I think they're the only ones, yeah.
Well, Hugo Bruce.
There's one thing, sorry, speaking of South Africa. They're conceding too many goal-scoring opportunities. This is what's been worrying me. And I don't know where it's coming from. I think, the way that I've watched them in the last match against Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is a tough match because it's a derby. Everybody talks about that 92 match when Peter Ndlovu scored, I don't know, was it a hat trick or 2 goals? And they beat South Africa 4-0 coming out of apartheid. They know each other very well. And when a team knows each other the 2 teams know each other very well, it's always going to be a tough match. But it doesn't excuse the fact that they conceded too many goal-scoring opportunities. And when I just looked at the structure of that South African team, particularly the midfield, at times it looked like Sipho Mbule, the master chef, as maybe even Wandile would call him. Too much distance between the double pivot, Stole and Teboho Mokoena, and Sipho Mbule. And then even the wingers, whether it's Moremi or Apollos, in my opinion, weren't doing enough of a good job tracking back at times. That's when Maswanise, if you look at his goal when he crossed up Mbukazi and scored, it was 6 South African defenders to 5 Zimbabwean attackers. And that's not a good enough ratio. You need at least 1 more midfielder back. So I think Hugo Bruce has to work on either fixing the personnel or fixing the structure.
And it's interesting you talk about that because I feel like that group was 3 derbies for South Africa. I say 3 derbies, why? Because obviously Angola, then Zimbabwe, then the history that we've seen at club and country level between South Africa and Egypt in recent countries, yeah. But the other thing I would like to ask you really is what country do you feel is doing the most? Just enough? They're just doing enough and they're there?
I think we can go back to Mali, honestly. Like that match against Morocco, it depends how you look at it. It's really all a thing of perspective. You can say they set out to frustrate Morocco and they wanted just to come away with a draw, and that's what they ended up doing. So they accomplished their goals, therefore it was a successful outing for them. You could also look at it and say, you could have won that match. You created enough goal scoring opportunities without really going for it. Because the way Tom St. Fiet lined up in that match, he lined up with 4 central midfielders in a 4-4-1-1. And the 4 midfielders were all central midfielders, no wingers. And then the one was Yves Bissouma, who's a defensive midfielder for Tottenham Hotspur, and he was playing as a number 10. And he explained it after. He says we wanted to clog all the space up in the middle of the pitch, and then we played with like inverted central midfielders as wingers to try and make sure they can invert and come into the middle of the pitch and pass between the lines. But with the attacking talent that they have in Kamori Doumbia, who's a very talented 22-year-old in the French league at Brest, with the likes of Nene Dorgeles and the AFCON that he had when he scored against Côte d'Ivoire in the quarterfinals last time around, you have the attacking talent to be a little braver, I think. And that's why I think Mali, they've done just enough, but I think there's more of a margin for progression for them. Yeah.
I like that. It reminds me of Libya and the way that they won the CHAN in 2014 in South Africa. Yeah. Didn't really win a game in 90 minutes. Just lifted the title.
Yeesh. And Mali went through with 3 draws in this group stage. Draw, and then...
I have another question for you. Who can't win the AFCON playing like this?
Bless you. Who can't win the AFCON playing like this? I think South Africa cannot win the AFCON being so defensively open, in my opinion. If they don't defend the transitions a little bit better, they cannot win the AFCON like this. I think South Africa, in my opinion, are one of the more underrated sides, particularly when you talk about the European audience or French Africa. French Africa doesn't really know South Africa, and they, I think, underrate them in that sense. And if you look at how good South Africa has been since last AFCON, I thought they would be one of the top 4 teams in this tournament. But the way they've been defending, I think they need to make some changes. And even maybe some of the distribution, a player like Ngizana, who's been so good physically, he's such a good defender physically, and he can dictate things in that sense. But if you talk about distribution, I know a lot of Sundowns fans are watching this saying, well, why didn't he bring, Mvala, or especially Kakana? Why is Kakana not even in the squad? Distribution-wise, probably better than a player like Ngizana, So that, and then the distance between the lines, particularly with, as I mentioned, Mbule and the double pivot, South Africa have to make adjustments if they want to go further, but I do think they'll make those adjustments.
Let's talk about the VAR. I saw you tweet and say something like, the North African teams are never going to beat these allegations. What was that about?
I see the discourse online that, the North Africans, like the AFCON is in North Africa, we're paying the referees. I mean, it's tough to say, but like, if you look at the second match day, for example, every single North African side scored a penalty. Morocco scored a penalty against Mali. Egypt scored a penalty against South Africa. Algeria scored a penalty against Burkina Faso, and then Tunisia scored a penalty against, I forget but they scored a penalty against Nigeria. So and then Tunisia got another penalty yesterday against Tanzania, which for something that I would deem a 50-50 foul. It seems like all of these penalties that these North African sides are winning, don't get me wrong, by the letter of the law, they're probably penalties. But their opponents also have 50-50 shouts that don't necessarily get called as penalties. So I could think of Burkina Faso, for example, Bertrand Traore, in the second minute of the match, he has his leg clipped from behind. That should be a penalty. It's as much of a penalty as the one that Algeria got a little bit later on, but they didn't get called it. So look, VAR has to improve, in my opinion. It has to be a little fairer for all teams on our beautiful continent. And overall, the overall level of refereeing, like Amadou Haidara, the Malian midfielder, got the ball. His leg was a little high, but he got the ball. That's never, ever, ever. It wasn't a malicious follow-through. It's never a red card. And I think Mali are going to appeal it, and I think it's eventually going to get overturned. But the standard of refereeing, in my opinion, has been a bit under par compared to previous African Cup of Nations tournaments.
Fair enough. Can you tell us what has frustrated you the most?
Not too much has frustrated. The rain. I mean, the rain has not been great just because... don't get me wrong, as journalists, we complain too much. We have a roof over our heads, we get free food, everything is fine for us. But I do think, especially the previous AFCON, Usher, was so great because Cote d'Ivoire really is a country where you have huge communities of, Burkinabes, Malians, Congolese, Guineans. There were all of West Africa was in the Ivory Coast, and so the weather was great. Yes, it was a little humid, but the point is like it was outside weather. People were outside. They were in public places. They were watching games together, making fun of one another. And for me, that is the spirit of the AFCON is exchange of human interaction. I think that's what Hugo Bruce meant when he meant to say AFCON vibes. It's not people dancing for him or whatever how people made it out to be. No, it's the spirit of change, of exchange, of interaction, of the continent being smaller, everybody coming together in one country and us learning about one another. Because of the rain, because of the fact that North Africa isn't really an integrated region, because of, I don't know, so many different factors, things like even like, logistics, like things like a Yalla app and things like that and e-visas. Unfortunately, we haven't really had as much. I'm not saying this is a bad AFCON, not by any means. This has been one of the better ones I've attended, but we just haven't had as much interaction as we had in the past. And I think that's been one of the more disappointing things, in my opinion, because we had such high expectations for this AFCON.
So I have a question in regards to, do you feel that the AFCON is becoming more physical? Is it tactical? How are coaches, approaching the games?
Both. Yeah, both, honestly. That's been one of the things that have impressed me the most in this tournament. We've talked about the quality of the big teams playing, but not just the quality on the pitch. I think the physical impact and then also the tactical evolution of these coaches as well has been incredible to watch. Physically, a match like Algeria versus Burkina Faso, my God, I did not want. Sometimes I wish I could play. As journalists, we go and you see the perfectly manicured pitch and you see the fans and you're looking at the stadium, say, you know what, I would love to play in this environment right now. That match, I watched the first 5 minutes. I did not want to be on that pitch because there were crunching tackles. People were like bleeding. Their socks were socks were all red, and that was a very, very physical match. Cote d'Ivoire versus Cameroon, a very physical match, lots of high intensity. I don't just mean crunching tackles, but I also mean like the number of sprints, that you can see in a match has been unprecedented in this tournament compared to previous tournaments. But then even tactically, as you mentioned, we've talked about, I think one of the main things that has changed when we talk about modern African football is the coaching staffs. So if we take a coach like Tom Saintfiet, for example, I think most people wouldn't associate him with being this great technician or tactician. But one thing that he does very, very well is he hires an incredible staff around him. Everybody speaks about his staff and says, you know what, these guys are top of their respective fields, whether it's the fitness coach who's South African, Rito, or a few others. They do a great job of working together as a team. Whereas in maybe 20 years ago at the AFCON, you'd have one coach and maybe one assistant. Now it's a team of people. And that's why I think we've had better tactical and better physical football as well.
It's interesting you talk about that. The fans. We've seen the Congolese fan who's standing for 90 minutes, paying homage to Patrice Lumumba, the first prime minister of the DRC. The hosts, the Moroccans are coming out in big numbers. And the LOC has taken a decision to say that they will allow local fans to enter stadiums, to watch and make sure that there's a good vibe. What do you make of all of that?
Yeah, I like the idea of opening doors, 20 minutes after starting. It's just, the only problem is if people know that that's going to happen, nobody's going to buy tickets anymore and they're just going to wait for the doors to open and enter. So I saw that Hugo Bruce was complaining about that a little bit. And I think it's something that continues to be discussed at an LOC, CAF level. And you have to remember that Morocco understand that the eyes of FIFA are on them and that FIFA knows that, they're hosting a tournament, the World Cup, in 4 years' time now. We're recording this on December 31st. Next year is 2026, 4 years. And so if they feel like Morocco are doing an amateurish job in terms of opening the doors and things like that, I think Morocco is very cognizant of that, and they want to seem as professional as possible. But overall, I think shout out to the Congolese fans. I think they've been the best non-host fans at this tournament, alongside the Algerians and Tunisians. But we expect that because they're neighbors. They're very close by. But the Congolese have traveled in droves. It's not just people coming from Europe. It's people coming from the DRC as well, or from neighboring countries in West Africa. The Lumumba homage is incredible. Not just because we all admire the personality, the politician, but people that had never heard of Patrice Lumumba in the United States of America, in UK, all of a sudden are saying, okay, he's paying tribute to who? And that's such a great thing because, you know, it gets to propagate some of our Pan-African values. So yeah, and there's been, unfortunately, you know, like this is, you guys don't understand too much French, but some of the Congolese influencers on TikTok and stuff are hilarious, and they talk so much. But there's Herman Amisi, there's a few of them, you know, that have been doing such a good job as well. So Congolese supporters have been great, Moroccan supporters have been great, Algerian, Tunisians as well. And yeah, I think the competition is, we're going to start feeling it right now. I think the real competition is about to begin.
It's interesting you talk about Haman Amisi. There's this video, obviously, which I think you've seen, where Sadio Mane is saying, Twala, Twala, and then he's like, Sa, you know, like kind of laughing at the Senegalese fans.
Catch you. He told them, I'm going to get you. That's what he told them, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful sight. And
that's the spirit of the AFCON, though.
That's the spirit of the AFCON. We've spoken so much about it, and it's very good maybe for the competition that particularly Senegal and the DRC finished as 1-1, and also Côte d'Ivoire and Cameroon. This is good also off the pitch, you know?
For those that don't know, Cameroon and Côte d'Ivoire are called the in-laws because Samuel Eto'o is married to an Ivorian. So he called them the in-laws when they were going to play each other, and since then, it's been a very close rivalry.
And they call each other Belle Famille. Yeah, very nice family. So let's look ahead, you know, to the knockout stages, and going to ask you quick, rapid questions. Tournament favorite?
Remains Morocco.
Dark horse?
DRC.
One player who decides a knockout game?
Wait. Ahmad from Manchester United. Diallo, sorry, I almost said Traore.
What's the one thing fans must watch out in the knockout stages?
How teams prepare penalty shootouts. I think the AFCON was one of the pioneers in terms of, if you remember Gebeski and that Egyptian team of 2021, of preparing which way players are going to shoot on a water bottle. I hadn't seen that done anywhere in the world prior to 2021 African Cup of Nations. I think we were pioneers in that sense. I think there's still some tricks up the sleeve, particularly for teams like Egypt. You know, they always have a trick up their sleeve. So how teams prepare penalty shootouts.
Anything else you're looking forward to on a personal level?
I don't want to be too controversial, but if Algeria gets by DRC, and then if Algeria gets by probably Nigeria, Algeria, Morocco in the semifinals, Usher is going to be a match like no other that we've seen at the African Cup of Nations in decades, probably, just because of the amount. It's going to be very messy, but the amount of media, the amount of players. These two sides are huge rivals, and then on top of that, the political context is not very good between the two countries. So the thought of an Algerian team upsetting Morocco in the semifinals after they've been waiting for this competition for 50 years, that would be crazy.
Absolutely. And for all those who don't know, the border between Algeria and Morocco has been closed since 1994, which literally means since South Africa got independence. Wow. The border has been closed.
Practically my whole life, yeah. I was born in 91, so it was only open for the first 3 years of my life. It's something that's really unfortunate. And despite the border being closed, you know, there used to always be, for example, flights. I flew directly from Algiers to Casablanca in 2018. No longer the case anymore, as diplomatic relations between the two countries have continued to degrade. So it's unfortunate, but the one really nice, heartwarming thing is that the supporters here have come together and they've really called for unity. So even if you go to the Algeria matches, you'll see 20 to 30% of the stadium are Moroccan supporters, and the vast majority of them are supporting Algeria. So that's been something that's been really heartwarming.
I mean, every time I greet someone who I think is Algerian or, you know, Moroccan and say, Kulshi Mizian, they'll say Mizian. So unless you ask them if they're Algerian or if they're Moroccan, you would never know.
Exactly.
But thank you so much for your time. Your Excellency, Maher Mehazi. I wish you all the best as you continue to cover the tournament. I know that people will be, you know, following you on your social media pages.
Likewise to you. Your Excellency is a term that should be reserved for Queen Usher Komugisha. In my opinion, the best media personality on the African continent.
Saha, Maher. Well, the group stages separated the pretenders from the contenders. Now, the AFCON really begins.